philosophy or argument or idea for studying play is that play cannot be really studied as an object of research, but instead play should be studied by playing.
My name is Maya Hay, and I am a postdoctoral researcher at the Center for the Social Study of Microbes, based at the University of Helsinki. My research is about fermentation and how to work with microbes who are usually difficult to see and detect. And my thoughts on play are informed by fermentation practices, which is at a home scale really based in sensory cues such as smelling and tasting and listening and touch and tactile senses.
My name is Viljami Kankaanpää-Kukkonen, and I'm a doctoral researcher in University of Helsinki in anthropology, and I study professional beekeepers in Spain. And before my young career in anthropology, I studied evolutionary ecology.
I'm Santtu Heikkinen. I'm a philosopher, philosophy PhD student, a junior researcher at the University of Helsinki. I work around themes of the mind-body problem, consciousness studies, the relationship between mind and matter, and more and more topics around how mentality or mind could be somehow primary in nature or at least ubiquitous, so found everywhere.
My name is Anna-Pauliina Rainio, and I am an educational psychologist, and currently I also work as a senior lecturer in early childhood education and care.
My name's Chris Bagley. I'm a psychologist and director of a charity called House of Imagination. And the core focus of my work really is working with young people, families, teachers, educators, whoever really, to try and unravel what are the social determinants of mental health, well-being and distress, with the aim really of co-constructing a society that allows people to thrive.
Darwinism, neo-Darwinist, selfish gene, and that sort of tracing back to the Russian problem, and then kind of figuring out how the selfish gene, altruism gene kind of figures into genetic understandings of today. I wish there was a part 2. I wish that there was a part 2, given that it is no longer just the accumulation of genetic capital, but it is now creating and concentrating new forms of genetic capital. And here again, I'm thinking specifically of bioengineering, synthetic biology, synthetic genomics, that is really taking off in hype solutionist narratives. Why do we get hung up on this sort of exceptionalist understanding of the human above all in terms of reason and ration and thinking rationally and operating out of this rationalized benefit, cost-benefit analysis?
I actually think there is a way of reconciling evolutionary thinking and existence of play and subjectivity. I think you have to begin from the assumption that evolution is true, and that selection happens, and you can also the rabbit hole goes down, and so far when you try to explain any kind of behavior, you can always try to find adaptive reason for whatever you are. But I think there is a way to think about play. I like to think that it's kind of analogous to sleep. Why do we sleep? It seems so pointless. There are many theories on why we sleep. The restorative theory that the nervous system is just so complex and so burdensome that it needs rest. that it needs to dose out for a moment just to keep it functioning. And the other one is like the plasticity theory, that we need sleep to repair and form new connections in our brains to learn things. You can think about play in a similar way, that preserves our capability for joy and subjectivity.
I found it really intuitively truthful, really something that resonated in what I do. Especially the fact that we have, as a humankind, for some reason, at least in the Western North, we have this desire to understand everything through the idea of aims or goals or usefulness of things. And then we have this huge activity, which is play, which cannot have end results. It must be free, it must be voluntary. So that was really like resonating, especially as I work with children. And children are also, they have been approved like animals that have been misunderstood and also who have been sidelined in society. And children's play hasn't been considered to be really central, although it has all these developmental potentials and goals. So in that way it resonated. I think there must be a lot of animal play that we have no idea of.
Well, in Graeber's essay, a couple of the things that he points out quite strongly, which I would agree with, is the very, very heavy sense of us living in a materialist world. And that's an extremely problematic assumption for young people's mental health, or young people in education. What that essentially does is it constructs them as machine-like, consciousness-free, robotic lumps that you essentially need to shape into thinking in a certain way so that they can succeed in the world. And it completely removes individual volition. It ignores all the complexities of consciousness, which I'll come on to in a minute. And it's that sort of Dawkins, Herbert Spencer, Daniel Dennett, who were mentioning Graeber's essay approach, whereby what you have to do is a very specific sequential set of things in a very robotic way, which is what schooling tends to look like often, to make sure that a young person's brain develops in a certain way. Now, there's no evidence of that. What they'll probably say is that what you're doing is you're supporting the brain to create synaptic connections between different parts of the brain so that you can then develop a young person's intelligence or a human being's intelligence. And it links with some of the neuroscientists who are materialists as well, right? Who say this part of the brain lights up when you're using memory. Just because something lights up in your brain or is more active in your brain at a certain time doesn't necessarily mean anything useful in terms of that person developing as a human being. All we know is that certain parts of the brain seem to be more active at some time than another. So we've got materialists running around, and I think Graeber expresses this very well in the essay, just posing absolutely ludicrously simplistic hypotheses about this, usually with a Darwinian element to it. Like, I think it's very problematic, and I much prefer a more tentative, possibly philosophically idealist conception of consciousness, which makes more sense to me, which is that consciousness is non-located.
And there's a view on this, which is there's we call powerful qualities, which is the idea that are, you know, there's everything is somehow qualitative, which is almost the same as saying it is conscious or you know, phenomenal meaning that it has something to do with experience. That, you know, the powerful qualities model is a view under which we see that all properties are phenomenal or experiential qualities, and some of them just have causal powers and some don't. Okay, that's like, you know, would be roughly the property monist view, but there's the property dualist view also, which is that, you know, that everything involves experience or involves mentality in this kind of basic way. But it might also, you know, involve properties which are more traditionally physical. So that this would be things that, for example, like the view that an electron might have some phenomenal properties linked to it. So it might be a crude experiencing entity, and this actually jives well with some of our major interpretations of quantum mechanics, especially the de Broglie-Bohm theory, which is one of the three major interpretations. The de Broglie-Bohm theory sees that like electrons in a way kind of they have a kind of radar for each other, and they kind of almost make decisions based on each other's position on where to go.
I think Graeber brings in some interesting ways of framing that around play as well, like this idea that, for example, particles at the subatomic level seem to behave in a probabilistic way, right? You can't predict what they're going to do. So if subatomic particles seem to have free will and seem to be able to do things that we can't predict, how on earth can you ever say that it's possible to ever completely unravel and form a sort of scientific materialist prediction of what the human consciousness thinks or is going to do?
For example, Sigmund Bauman calls the challenge of modern. Bauman very vividly describes how school institutions represent this need for homogeneity and kind of longing for control and longing for certain ways of being that are predictable.
Which is the idea that there's a cosmic mind. The world is kind of like a cosmic mind, and we are kind of just kind of sub minds of that. We are kind of parts of a vaster mind, much like an absolute in some sense. And these views are very common. The 20th century, as a basically sucked. You know, it was a terrible century in many ways. And one part of that terribleness might have come from this, march of somewhat nihilistic, overt leaning on the physical sciences and on empirical science as the only kind of only reality. Like that reality would be like this kind of field of empty matter, and that we are just kind of islands of mentality, or islands of some kind of feeling and sentiment, like stuck in this kind of uncaring, unliving world. That whole viewpoint, yeah, it's not very, does not really support our like the meaningfulness of life very much. What this kind of idealist or panpsychist direction in thought, what it can provide in some sense, is a stronger sense of connection with other things, with reality as a whole.
Life is ambivalent, and life is unpredictable and also strange. How play as an activity kind of shapes or helps to change the way institutional logic happens. It's often quite restrictive and requiring certain ways of being. So when you bring play in an institution, and when people actually start playing it really in its best, it changes the logic and it creates different possibilities for being, for all the participants.
What did you think?
Hey diddle diddle, the cat with the fiddle. The cow jumps over the moon. The little dog
I
laughs
want it in my hands, the bigger one.
to see such fun,
This is Raymond.
and the dish ran away with the spoon.